Good evening, my companion tonight. Out there, the modern world is still spinning in its endless, restless rhythm. But here, in the quiet space we've created, time seems to slow. I am a storyteller, a wanderer through the hallways of the past. My specialty is the Middle Ages, a world of knights in gleaming armor and vows of loyalty echoing through stone fortresses. But, every story of power, no matter where it unfolds, eventually leads back to one origin. A land ruled not by kings, but by living gods. That land is Egypt. Let's imagine it together now. Picture the deep blue ribbon of the Nile, stretching endlessly between two golden deserts, like a forgotten treasure. Along that ribbon, a civilization rose and thrived for over 3,000 years. So long that by the time the pyramids of Giza were already ancient wonders, the mighty Roman Empire had not yet been born. And at the center of that universe stood the pharaoh. He was not just a king. He was the earthly embodiment of Horus, the son of the sun god Ra. Every word he spoke was law. Every breath he drew was divine will. His palace shimmered with gold and precious stones. His gardens were heavy with the fragrance of lotus blossoms. Thousands of servants bowed low with every step he took. It was a portrait of perfection, the blinding pinnacle of power and wealth humanity had ever reached. But have you ever felt that when something is too perfect, too radiant, there might be cracks hidden just beneath the surface? Behind those lavishly adorned palace walls, in the thick darkness of royal corridors, there were whispers. Whispers of forbidden marriages arranged to preserve the sacred bloodline, but which carried the curse of illness across generations. Whispers of power struggles, where brotherhood and motherhood could be extinguished with a poisoned cup or the glint of a dagger in the night. And farther still, in the silent vastness of the Valley of the Kings, there are tombs that hold more than gold. They hold a haunting obsession with the afterlife, so consuming that it demanded not only wealth, but blood. The most loyal attendants, the most graceful dancers, the bravest warriors. Sometimes their loyalty was rewarded with one final honor, to die with their master and serve him for eternity. So what, then, is the true cost of becoming a god on earth? What is the price of immortality? That is the story I want to share with you tonight. Together, we'll gently peel back the gilded layers of the pharaohs, not to judge, but to understand. To see that beneath the heavy crown was a human being, flesh and bone, with burning ambition, primal fear, and a desperate longing to be remembered forever. This is not a dry history lesson. This is a lullaby, a story of power, of magic, and of secrets buried in the sands of time. So relax. Let the words carry you. Our journey into the dark and radiant heart of ancient Egypt begins now. They were not just kings. They were gods. In ancient Egypt, where the radiant sun illuminated colossal statues and the Nile flowed like the sacred artery of the land, a single human walked among his people as a living deity. The pharaoh. A pharaoh was not merely a ruler. He was the embodiment of the god Horus on earth and became Osiris after death, a divine cycle of rebirth far beyond the reach of anyone outside the royal bloodline. He was not elected. He was born to rule. In the eyes of the people, a living pharaoh didn't just ensure bountiful harvests or the seasonal rise of the Nile. He upheld cosmic balance and kept the universe from falling into chaos. His power did not come from the sword, but from the deep faith of a civilization that placed its trust in the eternal rhythm between heaven and earth. That reverence created a sacred and chilling distance. During morning rituals, priests did not call the pharaoh by name like a mortal. They addressed him with titles: Son of Ra, Keeper of Ma, Light of the People. A single drop of sweat on the pharaoh's brow could signal a national disaster. A mere smile might be interpreted as divine grace upon the entire delta. Yet behind that brilliant radiance lay a quiet tragedy. To be a god meant bearing the weight of perfection. A pharaoh was not allowed to be ill, not allowed to be tired, not allowed to feel sorrow. He had to remain sharp on the throne, hold his head high before the masses, offer incense to Amun before even tasting breakfast, and sign hundreds of decrees before the sun had set. It was an invisible burden, a divine form of solitude. Within the gilded palace walls, where brick walls were carved with scenes of military triumphs and immortal goddesses offered lotus flowers, people forgot that the pharaoh was still human. He too could love, could fear, could dream dreams that never came true. And sometimes, the cost of immortality was too high. A tomb buried deep in the earth, a body embalmed for months, servants entombed alive to accompany him, all to prepare for a journey to the afterlife he himself had never seen. How ironic! A pharaoh who held the power of life and death across an empire could not control his own fate. He was bound by legend, by rituals, by ancient prophecies. He was never allowed to simply be himself. And perhaps that is the paradox of divinity. Today, when we walk through museums and gaze at the golden mask of Tutankhamun or the still body of Ramses II lying beneath glass, we do not see only glory. We see obsession, sacrifice, and a profound yearning of ancient humanity to live forever, even at the cost of everything. That is why the stories of the pharaohs still live on. Not because they were gods, but because they were once human and carried within them all the light and darkness that humanity can bear. So lavish, yet utterly devoid of freedom. If you've ever dreamed of living like a king, with absolute power, draped in golden silks, surrounded by incense and velvet, then the life of an ancient Egyptian pharaoh might make you think twice. Because behind that endless splendor was a gilded cage where every step, every breath was dictated by the gods and a strict, unforgiving system of rituals. From the moment he opened his eyes in the morning, the pharaoh was no longer a man. He was the living embodiment of Horus, the guardian of Ma, the sacred balance of the universe. That meant every tiny gesture throughout his day held ceremonial weight and affected the entire kingdom. The morning began with a purification ritual. Sacred water from the Nile, heated and poured into a copper basin filled with lotus flowers and fragrant incense. A silent entourage of servants bathed the pharaoh with natron, the holy salt used to purify both body and spirit. Then came the anointing ritual, using rare oils of frankincense, cinnamon, and tree resin brought from the distant land of Punt, not just for beauty, but to repel evil spirits and reconnect the king with the divine. And then the pharaoh had to leave the palace for the temples. He wasn't allowed to eat breakfast at his leisure, nor was he permitted to rest. First, he had to offer gifts with his own hands, pray, and perform sacred rites before the statue of Amun-Ra, the god of light and life in Egypt. This was not merely a religious duty, it was a matter of existence, for if the king failed, the crops might fail, the Nile might not rise, the people could starve, and the cosmic order would tremble. Afternoons were no less demanding. The pharaoh received high officials in the palace, powerful men who bowed to the ground. reporting on everything from harvests and wars to droughts and disputes. Every royal decision had to be made with meticulous care, for it carried not only political weight, but divine consequence. By nightfall, the pharaoh did not simply rest. He might participate in festivals or go hunting, not for leisure, but to prove his superhuman strength before his court. Shooting arrows at lions, riding chariots across the desert, or leading ceremonial barges along the Nile, each act was a carefully crafted performance to reinforce his image as the man-god in the eyes of the people. But what of the world behind those golden walls? There were nights when the pharaoh collapsed from exhaustion. There were queens scheming for their sons to inherit the throne. There was a king, deified by his people, yet never allowed to live as a man. A life ruled by ritual, a soul shackled by duty, and a lonely figure atop a throne. And perhaps that very paradox is what haunts us about the pharaohs. Not because they were so different, but because they were so very human, yet forbidden to live like one. Death was not the end. It was the beginning of a life, eternal. For the pharaohs of ancient Egypt, death was never a final stop. It was merely a door, a journey to the afterlife, where they would continue to rule as gods in the realm of eternity. But to ensure that journey, they did not go alone. They brought an entire kingdom into the earth with them. When we explore ancient tombs, we encounter scenes that are both awe-inspiring and haunting. It's not just gold, jewels, or rare incense. There are hunting dogs, monkeys, antelopes, and even living people, all buried with the king to serve him forever. The tomb of King Hor-Aha, one of the earliest pharaohs, contained 10 donkeys that carried offerings in his funeral procession. King Narmer, who united Upper and Lower Egypt, was buried with 10 hunting dogs. And Pharaoh Waj, a ruler from the first dynasty, took with him 12 baboons, sacred animals of the god Thoth. But perhaps the most bizarre offering was human hair. Beneath the temple of Anubis at Saqqara, archaeologists discovered up to 80 tons of human hair, cut from slaves or devotees and offered as protective prayers for the pharaoh's soul. The Egyptians believed that those buried with the king were not victims. They were loyal servants, blessed to serve the divine in the next life. But the truth tells a darker story. Archaeological evidence shows that many were sacrificed, strangled, or struck on the head to die alongside the king. In the tomb of King Jur, 318 bodies were found, laid in perfect rows, including women and children. Some were buried in coffins inscribed with their names, as if to remind the world that they once had identities, lives, before becoming offerings. Over time, the practice of sacrificing the living was gradually replaced by Shabdi statues, small figurines believed to transform into servants after the king's death. Whether made of flesh or faience, they all reflect one truth: the pharaoh's overwhelming obsession with the afterlife, a deep fear that if not served properly, their souls would become lost, starve, or worse, be judged and annihilated. So they prepared for death as if building a palace. Every item was carefully selected: wooden boats to sail across the river of souls, food and drink, musical instruments, clothing, and thousands of statues buried beside them, all to allow the pharaoh to continue living in the next world as fully as he had in this one. But perhaps this meticulous, almost obsessive preparation reveals something deeper, that even divine kings feared death, or more precisely, they feared being forgotten. And so, They brought the entire world with them to ensure they never truly left it behind. For the pharaohs, death was not an ending, but a sacred rite of passage into a new existence. They did not simply die. They spent their entire lives preparing for death. Every step they took on earth pointed toward a single goal: to become immortal. The Egyptians believed that the soul was eternal, but it could only recognize itself in the afterlife if the body remained intact. And thus, the art of mummification was born. It was not merely a technique. It was a 70-day-long ritual. The pharaoh's body was washed in holy water from the Nile. His internal organs were removed and placed in canopic jars, each guarded by a protective deity. The heart, considered the seat of the soul, was carefully preserved, or sometimes deliberately removed if the king was deemed sinful. The body was wrapped in hundreds of layers of linen, soaked with resins, balms, and protective spells, transforming it into a spiritual spacecraft designed to carry the soul through the journey between life and death. But the body alone was not enough. The pharaoh needed loyal servants in the afterlife. Instead of sacrificing people as in earlier times, the Egyptians crafted shabti figurines, small statues made of clay or faience, shaped like humans, inscribed with names and even work pledges. When the pharaoh was summoned in the next life to farm, carry water, or govern the realm of spirits, these shabtis would take his place. Some tombs held hundreds, even thousands of them, a magical army destined to serve for eternity. Yet the final destination of that journey was not a paradise in the sky, but a hidden tomb deep beneath the earth. The pharaohs of the New Kingdom no longer built dazzling pyramids, easy targets for thieves. Instead, they chose the barren cliffs of the Valley of the Kings, where secret passageways led to burial chambers carved into limestone, a maze of art, mythology, and magic. The tomb walls were covered with funerary texts, like the Book of Gates, Book of Caverns, or the Book of the Dead, filled with thousands of spells and instructions to guide the soul through darkness, monsters, sacred fire, and divine judgment. If successful, the soul would reach the realm of Osiris, where lotus flowers bloomed forever, and the Nile flowed backward in eternal light. Pharaohs didn't just dream of immortality. They built entire systems of rituals, technologies, and architecture to achieve it. And perhaps it is this longing, timeless, boundless, achingly human, that keeps us captivated by them. In every linen wrapping around a mummy, every silent shabti figure, every carved word on ancient stone, echoes the eternal whisper of a soul desperate to live on. Some tombs do not hold just the body of a king, but an entire court buried alive. More than 5,000 years ago, when Egyptian civilization was still in its infancy, but reverence for the pharaoh had already surpassed human limits, one of the most chilling customs in history emerged: the sacrifice of servants to be buried with the king. At Abydos, the sacred burial ground of Egypt's earliest rulers, archaeologists uncovered tombs that contained not only a central sarcophagus, but hundreds of satellite graves, meticulously arranged like stars orbiting the sun. In one shocking case, the tomb of Pharaoh Jur of the First Dynasty was discovered with 318 human remains, servants, concubines, priests, guards, all buried alongside their ruler. These people did not die of old age. Marks on their bones show that many were bludgeoned or strangled, then hastily mummified and lowered into the earth. They were chosen, or rather, condemned, to accompany the pharaoh on his journey to the afterlife, a form of absolute, eternal servitude. Historians believe this reflects the supernatural authority the king held in the eyes of his people. If he was the son of a god, then even in death he continued to rule and required servants, just as he had in life. To the ancient Egyptians of that era, dying for the king was seen as a sacred honor. But did every servant agree? Or were they simply silent victims of a deeply superstitious religious and political system? In any case, the practice did not endure. Within a few centuries, it disappeared. The pharaohs of the New Kingdom, like Ramses or Seti, no longer buried the living. Instead, they used Shabdi figurines, magical statuettes, to replace real human attendants. Humanity may have progressed, but the shadow of those early sacrifices still lingers. What remains are silent burial pits. No headstones, no honors, only bones of people who once breathed, once lived, once saw the light of the sun, now lying forever beneath the feet of a king. We may not know their names, but history remembers them as a dark yet inseparable part of the great legend of the pharaohs. And when we bow our heads before the tomb of an ancient Egyptian king, perhaps we should also quietly remember those who died with him, not for power, but because of someone else's. Why would a dead king need 5,000 objects? That was the question the world asked in 1922 when Howard Carter stepped into a dark, silent room untouched for over 3,000 years and discovered the tomb of the young king Tutankhamun. Inside was not just a mummy, but an unparalleled golden treasure trove in the history of archaeology. Gilded doors, jewel-encrusted thrones, chariots, food, wine, even underwear. All of it was placed there for one single journey into the afterlife. A pharaoh was not merely a king. He was a living god, and his death was merely a continuation in another form. For that reason, the ancient Egyptians spared nothing to prepare for his rebirth. Gold, the metal of the gods, covered nearly every object in the tomb. Every grain of rice, every strand of hair was carefully arranged to ensure the king would lack nothing in eternity. But was it truly devotion, or the final display of absolute power? Tutankhamun was a relatively minor pharaoh, ruling for less than a decade. Yet his tomb revealed a level of opulence and excess that stunned the world. If a moderate king like Tut had over 5,000 artifacts, one can only imagine what treasures were buried with pharaohs like Ramses II or Seti I. Each object was chosen with care. A dagger made from a meteorite, so the king could fight off demons in the underworld. An ebony bed inlaid with ivory, so he could rest in sacred dreams. And most famously, the golden death mask, not just a symbol of power, but a divine face meant to help the soul recognize its own body during the perilous journey through the afterlife. The discovery of Tutankhamun's tomb was a turning point, not only for archaeology, but for how humanity views eternity. These items weren't merely possessions. They were messages. The pharaoh was saying, "I have not died. I am simply living somewhere else." Yet the grandeur also evokes a haunting question. How could one man take an entire world with him, simply because he was king? Did the afterlife they dreamed of truly exist? Or was it all just the deep-seated fear of the powerful, afraid that one day they would be forgotten? They were gods, but also human. Beneath the dazzling aura of supreme power, beneath golden masks and majestic temples. The pharaohs of ancient Egypt were worshipped as living gods, guardians of cosmic balance, rulers on behalf of the divine. But in the end, when the tomb doors closed and the incense faded into silence, they were still just human. The mummies, wrapped tightly in linen and soaked in precious oils and resins, could not hide the raw truth of death. Behind the illusion of immortality were bodies that once felt pain, sickness, and slowly decayed with time. Ramses II, the greatest pharaoh of ancient Egypt, ruled for 66 years with unmatched authority. Yet when his mummy was unearthed, archaeologists found a fractured skull, missing teeth, and signs of severe arthritis. He did not die in glory, but passed away in the agony of old age. Or Akhenaten, the radical pharaoh who transformed Egypt's religion, whose elongated skull, wide hips, and slender frame gave him a strange appearance. Though worshipped as the embodiment of the sun god Aten, he was a man beset by criticism, isolation, and a mysterious death. His name later erased from history by those who followed. Even the children of Tutankhamun, placed beside him in his tomb, were stillborn infants, never given the chance to see sunlight. Though of royal blood, they could not escape the fragility of human life. And that is what makes the world of the pharaohs so captivating. They were gods, but they were also men. They ate, they loved, they envied, they feared death. They built temples not only to glorify themselves, but to fight against being forgotten, the fate we all fear most. And perhaps it is that very contradiction between divinity and humanity that keeps us enthralled by the stories of ancient Egypt. Because in them, we don't just see the splendor of a lost civilization. We see ourselves, fragile beings who also dream of something eternal. They were once men who could command an entire nation to bow. But in the end, they were only flesh wrapped in linen, lying still beneath the desert, waiting to be remembered. As the sun rises behind the sacred columns carved with divine reliefs, the pharaoh's daily deification ritual begins. This is no ordinary morning. It is a moment of transition between the mortal and the eternal. In a limestone bath chamber, the golden light of dawn filters through the lattice windows, illuminating the clear water drawn from the sacred Nile itself. Silent and reverent, attendants assist the pharaoh, believed to be the living embodiment of Horus, as he steps into a gleaming copper basin. White lotus petals float atop the water, symbolizing rebirth. This is not merely a bath, but a holy purification ceremony, a cleansing of earthly dust to prepare for divine transformation. After being scrubbed with natron, the same mineral used in embalming, the pharaoh is anointed with rare and precious oils, resin from Lebanon, frankincense from Punt, and cinnamon oil from distant lands. These scents not only soothe the skin but act as a sacred armor, warding off evil spirits. A royal makeup artist then lines the king's eyes with black coal, not just for beauty, but to invoke the soul of Ra, the sun god, and protect the pharaoh's vision from malevolent spirits of the unseen realm. His skin is dusted with golden powder, his hair oiled and neatly combed, every detail performed according to sacred formulas passed down for millennia. Then comes the most solemn moment, the donning of royal regalia. The red crown of Lower Egypt and the white crown of Upper Egypt are united to form the double crown, the ultimate symbol of national unity. The gold-embroidered cloak, the crook and flail, representing both authority and compassion, are lifted and presented like sacred treasures. At this moment, the pharaoh is no longer a man of flesh and bone. In the eyes of the gods, he becomes the embodiment of Ma, the cosmic order. Every movement is a religious act, every breath a silent prayer. And when the pharaoh emerges from the chamber, amid the beat of bronze drums and clouds of incense, the people fall prostrate at his feet. No one dares look upon his face, for the gaze of a god could scorch the soul of a mortal. It is this daily deification ritual that sustained the pharaoh's divine power for over 3,000 years. A spellbinding mourning where man becomes God, where politics merges with religion, and where power is woven into every drop of sacred oil and every fold of the golden cloak. As the sun sank behind the blazing desert, the radiant glory of Ra gradually receded, making way for the pharaoh's final court of the day. Yet while the light faded outside, the king's power still blazed within the gilded halls of the royal palace. Guarded by elite soldiers clad in gold-inlaid armor, the pharaoh entered the audience chamber, where high officials bowed low before him. Seated on a towering throne, its back carved with the image of Horus the falcon spreading his wings in protection, the king received scrolls of petitions, listening to reports on the borders, harvests, and the well-being of his people. Every word he spoke was law. Every nod of his head could change a destiny. At times, these councils bore witness to trials of great importance or the arranging of royal marriages, moments where life, death, and love revolved around the judgment of a god-king. As twilight fell, the pharaoh would often trade his golden robes for hunting leathers and don a warrior's helmet. Accompanied by attendants and hounds, he rode his chariot into the desert to perform the sacred royal hunt, an act not only of physical prowess, but a symbolic conquest over chaos and disorder, as taught by ancient Egyptian belief. After the hunt, the entourage returned amid the blare of bronze trumpets and the beat of ceremonial drums, preparing for a sacred royal festival. Beneath torchlit skies and the scent of incense drifting through the palace courtyards, the pharaoh, queen, and nobles raised goblets in praise of the gods. Whether it was the Opet festival, the festival of the stars, or a night devoted to the god Amen, every celebration included sacred dances, wine, music, and chants of eternal life echoing among the stone columns. Yet even in a life of divine grandeur, private moments were essential to the pharaoh's sacred journey. As night deepened, he would return to the inner chambers, where wives, concubines, and selected priestesses awaited as part of a ritual of divine procreation. Intimacy was not merely desire. It was a cosmic rite of creation. In the soft glow of oil lamps and the sharp perfume of resin, the pharaoh and his chosen consort reenacted the moment when the god Autumn brought forth life from his own being. It was rituals like these, hidden beneath layers of splendor, that formed a closed cycle of governance, power, ceremony, and desire, all reflected in one divine principle. The pharaoh is a living god, and when night finally blanketed the land of the Nile, the pharaoh lay down in his private chamber, while the quiet world beyond still whispered prayers for him. For as long as the pharaoh lived, cosmic order endured, and so another day came to a close, not merely the day of a man, but the completed cycle of a god on earth. They were carved in stone as gods. They wore the crown of Horus, the cloak of Osiris, and walked among mortals like sunlight over the desert, eternal, untouchable. But behind that immortal radiance, pharaohs were still flesh and blood, with hearts that could love, worry, ache, and tremble at the shadow of death. We look up at the massive pyramids, the statues etched 5 meters high, standing tall in the windswept sands of time. But few remember that within those eternal tombs lie mummies who once coughed blood from tuberculosis, limped from war wounds, and cradled their dying daughters while crying out like any mortal father. Ramses II, the greatest pharaoh in Egypt's history, ruled for over 60 years with triumph and grandeur. But when his mummy was unwrapped in 1886, it revealed a broken body, missing bones, a punctured skull, not from battle, but from tomb robbers who shattered his dream of eternal rest. Tutankhamun, the boy king famed for his radiant golden mask, died at just 19, likely from malaria and an unhealed fracture. Next to his embalmed body lay tiny baby girls, his daughters, who died before they ever drew a breath. No ritual could save a shattered heart from the darkness of eternity. Behind gilded walls stretched a maze of royal intrigue. Nefertari, Ramses II's beloved queen, had her tomb desecrated by rivals in the harem, her image chiseled away, a cruelty worse than murder, for it erased her very existence in the afterlife. And Akhenaten, the heretic king, his name struck from history, his capital buried, his final resting place unknown. His daughter, Ankhesenamun, was forced to marry her own father, later wed her half-brother, and died young, childless, and forgotten. All of these stories point to a single truth. The immortality pharaohs so desperately sought was but an illusion. Death, betrayal, loneliness. They came for them as surely as they come for us all. The monuments they left behind are not just testaments to power, but quiet echoes of sorrow drifting across eternity. And perhaps that is why we cannot stop loving them, because they were not just kings. They were souls, caught between divinity and humanity. They were as distant as the stars, yet as near as breath. And in the pyramids, the tombs, and the whispered prayers still resonating today, we are still calling their names, as if calling out to the fragile humanity within ourselves. Beneath the misty shadow of the pyramids, where the desert winds have ceased, silent souls sleep, unnamed, unhonored, with only sand to cover their fate. We often remember the pharaohs as divine, powerful, glorious, laid to rest with gold and ancient prayers. But there were others who died with them, not in splendor, but in silence. At Abydos, around 5,000 years ago, the burial site of a king named Jur revealed something that chills the modern soul. Not just the grand tomb of the ruler, but over 300 smaller graves aligned in perfect rows around it. Not tombs for nobles, but for servants, officials, women, children, even dogs. They did not die of old age. They did not die of illness. They died out of duty, because the ancient Egyptians believed that the pharaoh did not simply rule the living, he continued to rule in the afterlife. And to govern well, he needed servants. One by one, fan bearers, cooks, musicians, even priests were killed and buried alive with the king to serve him forever. No farewells, no personal funerals, no gravestones carved with names. Only death. Silent, compulsory, and called an honor. Some were stabbed. Others were gently strangled so as not to damage the body. For if the soul and form were not whole, they could not awaken in the afterlife. Some were children. Some were sleeping when they were summoned to follow. No one asked if they wanted to. Over time, the Egyptians abandoned this practice. Shabti figurines emerged, wooden statues magically imbued to take the place of real people, magic instead of flesh. But Abydos remains, a chilling testament to the price of immortality. Perhaps the most haunting part is not the number, but the silence. There is nothing on those little graves. No names, no sign that they ever existed. We often think of pharaohs as lonely gods in the eternal night. But the truth is, they were not alone. They brought with them a host of souls, people who had no choice. And they were the true victims of a civilization intoxicated by death. As we walk past those ruins, breathing in the hot desert dust, we can't help but feel a tightening in our chest. Because these people didn't die by fate. They died for a dream that was never theirs. And then, a voice seems to whisper in our minds. Soft, like wind brushing across stone. They didn't ask to be immortal. They only asked to live once, but no one heard them. There are mummies that are no longer whole. There are kings whose names have been lost. And there are souls still quietly passing through this world, hoping to be remembered, even just once. The history of ancient Egypt is not only told through golden carved walls or proud pyramids rising toward the sky. It is also a history of rediscovery, of modern hands peeling back the linen wrappings of time, layer by layer, to face the truth. Raw, fragile, and sometimes heartbreaking. In the late 19th century, when Western scholars flooded into the Valley of the Kings, they came not only with shovels and notebooks, they came with the illusion of touching immortality. They opened coffins, peeled away the resins, unwrapped the linen veils from the faces of pharaohs who had slept for thousands of years. And what they found was not divinity, but decay, broken teeth, cracked bones, eyes that once looked upon the world, now nothing but hollow voids. There were kings once worshipped by entire kingdoms, yet when their mummies were shipped to Europe, they were stripped of their wrappings and put on display. Some pharaohs who once demanded eternal rest were auctioned off. Their rings, their garments, sold like merchandise. And worse still, some mummies were boiled down to extract resin, believed by Victorian doctors to be medicinal. They called it mumia, claiming it could cure anything from a cough to heartbreak. That was no longer archaeology. It was violation. Yet as time passed, something strange began to happen. The more people uncovered ancient Egypt, the more they began to feel compassion. Mummies slowly had their names restored. Museums began to display them with reverence. Modern funerals were held, in which Egyptians today bowed their heads to honor the royal ancestors, as if they had only just passed away. And in that moment, we were no longer mere onlookers, but keepers of memory. The ancients said, a soul truly dies only when no one remembers their name. So when we speak their names aloud, Tutankhamun, Ramses, Seti, Nefertari, are we not returning to them a glimmer of light from this world? Because in the end, whether or not they were divine, they once loved, once hurt, once dreamed, and once feared, just like we do. And perhaps when we stand before a withered mummy encased behind thick glass, what we see is not death, but a quiet plea whispered across thousands of years, "Don't forget me." But the story is not over, because after peeling back the linen wrappings, after removing golden rings from the hands of the dead, humanity began to face a deeper question. We didn't just want to know who the pharaohs were. We wanted to know what kind of people they had been. We began to listen, but this time, not to the reading of ancient inscriptions, but to echoes from the bones, from DNA, from cracks in skulls, from fingers curled in pain. Modern science has replaced shovels with microscopes. Instead of unwrapping mummies, they perform CT scans. Instead of guessing, they decode genomes. And through these images, a new Egypt has emerged, no longer myth, but real humanity. We now know Ramses II suffered from severe arthritis and walked with difficulty in his final years. We know Tutankhamun had a clubfoot, broke his left leg shortly before death, and walked with a cane. We know Seti I had a deep fracture near his heart. Whether from a blade or from illness, we don't yet know. They were not immortal. They were not superhuman. They felt pain. They feared death. They struggled to survive, just like anyone else. When researchers reconstructed the face of a mummy using 3D imaging, the haunting part was not the realism. It was the eyes. Eyes that stared across millennia, not asking for glory, but quietly whispering, "I once lived. Do you see me?" And strangely, in that moment, we saw them more clearly than ever before. No longer just elaborate names in dusty textbooks. No longer wooden statues sitting stiffly on golden thrones. But a father who once lost his child. A boy who never got to grow up. A woman who once smiled in the royal court and then faded into oblivion. We began to say their names not out of curiosity, but out of affection. Because we realized, in death, they were finally coming back to life. They didn't need thrones. They didn't need pyramids. They only needed a human heart to remember them as real people. And when the museum lights go dark, when the final note in the video fades to silence, if a single heart still aches, even slightly, then perhaps, somewhere, a soul wrapped in thousand-year-old linen has just smiled. Because now, they are no longer forgotten. Behind the cold stone statues and royal golden glow, the pharaohs were once living beings, breathing with the desert wind, watching the sun rise over the Nile, and quietly passing through moments of ordinary life that history rarely tells. Each morning, as the sun rose behind the stone columns of Karnak Temple, the pharaoh was not just a king, but the earthly embodiment of the god Ra. He would awaken in his cool stone palace, gently stirred by the soft melodies of handmaidens and the whispers of priests. The sun god has returned to the sky, O Eternal One. He would wash his face with scented water, dress in pure linen robes, wear amulets engraved with sacred spells. These were not mere routines. They were acts of devotion. For every step the pharaoh took was believed to be a living ritual, a bridge between heaven and earth. As he walked down the grand hallways, shaded by ostrich feather fans, passing rows of stone lions, each statue bore records of victories, prayers, and secrets known only to the gods. Yet behind all that splendor lay unspoken sorrows. There were nights the pharaoh could not sleep, not because of court intrigues, but because his firstborn had a fever, because the queen wept quietly in the next room, because of a strange dream of death, something even gods could not banish forever. Beneath that gilded throne lay a loneliness as long as the corridors of a tomb. And though surrounded by servants and advisors, deep down, the pharaoh was still a man, longing to be understood, to be loved, to be remembered not just through monuments, but through the human heart. At grand festivals like Opet or Sed, people from across the land would gather in Thebes, singing the king's name, tossing lotus flowers toward the divine bark. Amid the drums and incense, the pharaoh would emerge like a god. But did anyone see, in that moment, a flicker in his eyes? A distant look, as if silently asking, "When I am no longer a god, will anyone remember I was once human?" Royal life in Egypt was not pure light. It was a sacred performance, where the pharaoh was both actor and director, and also a prisoner, of a role no one could refuse. And it is in those very human moments, amidst divine radiance, that we glimpse the true soul of Egypt. A civilization remembered not just for its pyramids, but for the way it lived each breath with reverence, and faced death with a loneliness no one could fully grasp. And so, whether it was the great Ramses or the young Tutankhamun, the rebellious Akhenaten or the radiant Nefertari, all must eventually pass through the final doorway, death. But the Egyptians never saw it as the end. To them, death was only the first chapter of a new rebirth. In the darkness of the pyramid, the priests silently prepared for the most sacred rite of the pharaoh's life, the opening of the mouth ceremony. The lips of the dead were gently touched with a blade of gold, so that the mouth might speak, the ears might hear, and the heart might awaken in the world beyond. Every linen wrap around the king's body was not meant to conceal, but to protect. Each drop of resin, every carved spell on the coffin, every statue of the god Anubis placed beside him, all served one purpose: to ensure the pharaoh would not walk alone. Because even a god needs a guide through the darkness. The mummy was lowered into a deep tomb, where hundreds of wall paintings told the journey through the underworld, crossing rivers of fire, facing terrifying beasts, and finally arriving at the moment of the heart's judgment, where the soul of the king would be weighed against a single feather. If his heart was heavy with sin, it would be devoured by a monster. But if it was light as the feather, he would be granted eternal life. Every pharaoh feared that moment, for no throne, no treasure could replace a pure heart. That feeling, standing before Osiris, completely exposed, with no title, only truth, reminds us that even kings were human. And that is the most beautiful moment of all. Perhaps that is why the world has never forgotten them. Because immortality is not in the mummy, but in the stories they left behind. The pyramids may one day fall, the linen may decay, but the prayers endure, echoing across thousands of years. We are still calling their names, still telling their lives with trembling hearts, still mourning the loneliness they carried. And in that remembrance, they are still alive, not in tombs, but in the hearts of those who listen. And perhaps that is the immortality they truly longed for all along. Not power, not crowns, but to be remembered as a soul. We continue to look toward Egypt not only with the eyes of archaeologists, but as seekers, searching for fragments of our own souls. Because deep down, not everyone has a pyramid. No one is embalmed in sacred resin, but everyone fears being forgotten. And that is why we love Egypt, not just because they once built immortal monuments, but because they dared to dream of immortality, dared to devote their entire lives to finding a path through death. Their art, their poetry, their rituals scattered across the sun-baked red land, none of it was random. Everything they did pointed toward one single yearning: How can this memory survive? So they wrote their names on stone walls. They carved scenes of meals, words of love, the laughter and tears of daily life into the sides of their tombs. Not to boast, but to tell the future. I lived. And strangely, more than 3,000 years later, when we read those words, when we see the image of a father holding his daughter, a wife looking at her husband with trust in her eyes, we suddenly feel that they are not strangers at all. We are like them. We love, we lose. We fear that time will erase us. And because of this, Egypt is not just history. They are a mirror reflecting who we are. They didn't just teach us about death. They taught us how to live so meaningfully that even death must bow before us. From a line carved into stone, from a withered hand clutching a protective amulet, from eyes that no longer open but still look at us through 1,000 years of dust, Egypt whispers to us, if you live with your whole soul, you will never truly die. That is not just their belief. It is the shared hope of all humanity. And that is why, after all these centuries, we still tell their story, like a beautiful dream we never want to wake from. We have walked together through tombs, followed the traces of ancient kings and queens. We've touched bones, curses, and the sacred glow of Horus's crown. But now, what remains is not just knowledge, but a feeling harder to name, a quiet sense of gratitude. Gratitude, for they left us a civilization where every stone carries a dream of surpassing death. Gratitude, for through the winds and sands of thousands of years, they still whisper lessons about life. We once thought the pyramids were prisons for the dead, but now we understand. They are sanctuaries of life, vivid memories, longings, and deeply human emotions from a world long gone. We are grateful for the hands that built the temples, even if those hands were never named. We are grateful for the artists who painted every detail on tomb walls, every symbol, as if they believed that one day someone would find them and listen. Grateful that someone placed a small Shabdi figurine beside the mummy, not for beauty, but so the departed wouldn't be alone in the afterlife. Grateful that they lived with the deep belief, kindness does not end when we die. We, the living, are now carrying their dreams forward. And sometimes, in a quiet afternoon, as we watch the crimson sunset that looks just like the sun that once set over ancient Egypt thousands of years ago, we fall into silence, because something deeply sacred stirs in the veins, an invisible thread connecting the hearts of the present to the souls of the past. You don't have to be a historian. You don't have to go to Luxor or Cairo. All it takes is a moment of stillness, a second of remembrance. And that is enough for ancient Egypt to live again through our very hearts. And perhaps, if a pharaoh's soul is watching us from the other side of eternity, they will smile, not for power, not for glory, but because they know, I have not been forgotten. We listen to stories of the pharaohs not merely to remember a lost civilization, but to delve into the intricate labyrinth of our own human journey. Ancient Egypt, with its pyramids, mummies, and gods of thunderous might, is not just a chronicle of stone and myth. It is, certainly a mirror held up to our souls, quietly asking a question as ancient as breath itself. Am I truly living? Not living by the standards of law or throne, but by the heartbeat of one's verdant spirit. The pharaohs could command stars to be charted, mountains to be moved, temples to rise from dust. And yet, in the end, They left behind not just monuments, but asterisk traces of humanity woven into the grand tapestry of time. A glance carved into cold limestone, a whispered prayer for a child under the hush of night, a golden mask, not forged for vanity, but as a quiet plea to time. Please see me with your heart. And isn't that what we, too, are searching for in this kaleidoscopic world, where noise outshouts meaning, where speed blurs depth, where mosaic lives drift past each other without touching. We walk among millions of faces, yet feel unseen. We share every moment online, yet rarely let anyone into the sacred stillness of our innermost longing. And then, the enigmatic voices of ancient Egypt beckon. From across millennia, they whisper, we, too, long to be loved, to be known, to be remembered, not by stone, but by truth. That realization is not academic. It is awakening. History ceases to be a subject and becomes a crucible, forging awareness, stirring memory, reminding us of the intertwined threads between compassion, slowness, connection, and the true worth of a remembered life. Pharaohs were kings, yes, but they were also people. And we, though not rulers of empires, can still leave behind light. Not the kind that dazzles cities, but the captivating quiet kind that orchestrates warmth in the hearts of those who remember us. No tombs needed, no gold, just a life lived deeply kindly and with honesty. That is a legacy worth carrying, and when we depart, someone will hold our spirit, just as we now, in this moment, hold theirs, with nothing but our hearts, as the bridge that eternally transcends time. If there is one thing that time cannot erase, it is what is kept in the human heart, not carved in stone, not cast in gold, but held in feeling. And it is that feeling that has kept Egypt from disappearing. On the stone reliefs where pharaohs wear their crowns, we see their eyes, not the eyes of rulers, but the eyes of someone who once lived, who once loved, who once feared, who once hoped, who once sat in the silence of night, quietly placing a hand over their chest and wondering, when I leave this world, who will remember me? And then, 3,000 years later, someone, maybe you, maybe me, maybe someone sitting in front of a small screen in a quiet room, listens, not with the mind, but with the heart. When we listen with the heart, the past is no longer the past. It becomes the present. It becomes a continuation. Between us and those ancient souls, there is no distance of time, only a delicate thread, trembling through thousands of years of dust, connecting not through words, but through understanding. In one tomb painting, a father is shown leading his child between rows of pillars. In another, a woman places her hand on the pharaoh's chest in farewell. No one knows their names. No one knows if she was a wife, a mother, or a stranger. No one knows the name of the child, but when we look at them, we recognize ourselves, because all they were doing was loving, and all we are doing is loving. We may not have lived in the same era, may not have worshipped the same gods, may not have spoken the same language, but that love, that longing, that fear of being forgotten is the same. And that is what makes this journey we've just taken not merely a video, but a meeting between two souls separated by 3 millennia who still recognize each other in silence. No words needed, only shared breath and the quiet fall of tears. When the final flame in the burial chamber fades, when the funeral music has dissolved into dust, and the gods have returned to their silence, all that remains is a handful of ash and a whisper that has never truly gone out. That whisper is not spoken aloud, nor played on instruments. It lives in the gaze, in the tearful upward glance of those who, today, are retelling the stories of long ago. Because we have not truly said goodbye to ancient Egypt, we've simply folded a page of the book for now. Within every block of stone, every line of hieroglyphs, every fold of the burial shroud, there lingers a quiet, miraculous belief that memory can endure, that a human being, no matter how small, can leave behind something that touches the far reaches of time. And when we leave this video, our hearts carry more than just images of pyramids or the names Tutankhamun, Ramses, Nefertari. They carry a profound stillness because we know we've just brushed against something deeper than history, a collective soul whispering through time. Yes, the pharaohs may be gone, the thrones may lie buried, but love, loss, hope, and fear, they remain. And that is what makes them immortal. Not the mummies, not the golden masks, but people like us, those who listen with their hearts, who shed tears for a soul long vanished, who whisper the name of a civilization that may not belong to us, but somehow touches the deepest part of who we are. Because in the end, perhaps what truly makes a person live forever is not power, not conquest, but the ability to move another across millennia, to feel something when they remember you. Every journey must eventually reach its end, but what we felt cannot be lost. It stays in a quiet corner of the soul, like a silent prayer, like a flicker of light in eternity, and perhaps in another lifetime, when you pass by a ruined temple or see the sun set behind a stretch of golden desert, you'll find yourself smiling without knowing why, because the soul of Egypt is still walking beside you. When we grow older and look back on the years we've lived, what haunts us most is not what we never achieved, but what we fear might be forgotten. The story of the ancient Egyptian pharaohs is not just about mystical legends or majestic pyramids. It is a mirror reflecting the deepest longing of every human being, to live a meaningful life, to be loved, and to be remembered. Whether it's a king who ruled for decades or a father quietly living an ordinary life today, what they leave behind is not power or possessions, but the mark of emotion, of sincere presence in this world. The ancient Egyptians believed that if a name continued to be spoken, the soul remained alive. That's not some distant myth. It is a deeply human truth. Because after we've endured the trials of daily life and the shifting winds of time, we begin to ask ourselves, what will remain when I'm gone? And the answer is found in the simplest things: a gentle gaze remembered by a grandchild, a kind word passed on through generations, a quiet act of goodness that someone still carries in their heart after many years. Middle-aged and elderly generations may no longer chase material heights, but they are the true keepers of living memory for those who come after. The story of the pharaohs, with all their glory and sorrow, teaches us something clear: to live each moment fully, to treat others with kindness, is the most enduring way to etch your name into the current of life, without needing monuments, without needing titles. All it takes is a heart warm enough a soul deep enough. Egypt did not endure because its dynasties never fell. It endures because of memory, because of gratitude, because of those who refuse to let the past be forgotten. And in the same way, each of us, no matter how many springs and autumns we've seen, can still live on in the hearts of others if we have ever truly lived with love. And so, we've come to the end of our journey tonight. Together, we walked through grand halls, crept into dark tombs, and listened to the echoes of 3,000 years of history. We witnessed God kings at the height of their power, but we also saw them as mere humans, chained by the very greatness they embodied. And as I look back on that epic and tragic tale, I can't help but ask ourselves, what can we, the people of the 21st century, truly learn from them? The first and perhaps deepest lesson the pharaohs left me is about the true nature of power. They had it all: endless wealth, absolute authority, and worship like gods. But were they free? Not at all. They were bound by thousands of rigid rituals. They lived in constant fear of betrayal, of divine judgment. Their golden crowns were, in truth, gilded cages. It reminds us in our modern lives that sometimes our endless pursuit of control over work, relationships, status doesn't lead to freedom, but to anxiety. True power may not lie in ruling others, but in mastering ourselves, living a life of balance and authenticity. The second lesson is about Astor's legacy and immortality. The pharaohs built pyramids of stone so their names would endure through time. And in a way, they succeeded. We still speak of them. But when we look at those monuments, do we remember only the might of Khufu? Or do we also sense the sweat, the tears, the lives of tens of thousands who labored and died for it? It makes me wonder, Astros, what kind of legacy do we want to leave? Is it material success, shiny titles, or is true legacy something invisible, built from kindness, from generosity, from the quiet ways we touch others' hearts? Perhaps a pyramid of compassion and goodness lasts longer than any temple of stone. And from those lessons comes a rising emotion within me. Astros, deep gratitude for the life we have today. Let us be grateful that we live in a time where each human life is valued. We no longer fear being chosen for sacrifice or buried beside another. Let us be grateful that we have the freedom to choose to choose whom we love, what we believe, and which path we walk, not determined by bloodline or a destiny written in stone. Let us be grateful that Esther's knowledge is no longer a privilege. We can explore the entire world through a small screen, while in the days of the pharaohs, knowledge was locked away in temples, guarded like treasure. So tonight, the message I wish to leave you with is this. Look at the story of the pharaohs as a mirror. Recognize their ambitions, their fears in your own soul, because those are deeply human emotions. But instead of letting them lead us towards selfishness and obsession, let us use that energy to create. Don't build pyramids of ego. Build pyramids of kindness, of creativity, of real connection with the people around you. True legacy doesn't lie in how people remember you after you're gone, but in how fully and meaningfully you lived while you were here. I would love to hear your thoughts. After this journey, what's the greatest lesson you take with you? What legacy do you wish to leave behind, no matter how big or small? Share it in the comments so that our stories can continue to connect and inspire one another. Thank you for traveling with me tonight. I wish you sweet dreams, and may you awaken tomorrow with an open grateful heart. Good night, dear listener.